Hello and welcome. You're watching the Daily Report for Tuesday afternoon, May 10th, here in Korea. I'm Min Sun-hee. The inauguration of the 20th President of South Korea took place just a few hours earlier on this Tuesday at the National Assembly here in capital Seoul. My colleague Yoon Jung-min joins me now live on the line. Jung-min, you've been there since early this morning covering the ceremony itself. Let's start then with details of President Yoon Suk-yeol's inauguration address.
Sure, Sunny. So for his inaugural speech, President Yoon Suk-yeol said he would rebuild a country where the people are the true owners. Take a look.
저는 자유, 인권, 공정, 연대의 가치를 기반으로 국민이 진정한 주인인 나라, 국제사회에서 책임을 다하고 존경받는 나라를 위대한 국민 여러분과 함께 반드시 만들어 나가겠습니다.
During his inaugural speech, President Yoon emphasized freedom 35 times. He also touched upon the need to address issues like the pandemic, supply chain issues, climate change, and other social conflicts, but said that politics cannot function well right now because of a crisis of democracy. He criticized excessive collective conflict in the nation, stressing the need for the value of freedom to overcome the conflict and restore universal values. On the economic front, he stressed the need for fast growth to overcome social polarization driven by science and technology. Take a listen.
빠른 성장 과정에서 많은 국민들이 새로운 기회를 찾을 수 있고 사회 이동성을 제고함으로써 양극화와 갈등의 근원을 제거할 수 있습니다. 도약과 빠른 성장은 오로지 과학과 기술 그리고 혁신에 의해서만 이루어낼 수 있는 것입니다.
On North Korea, the new president said the door for dialogue is open to resolve its nuclear issues.
그리고 북한이 핵 개발을 중단하고 실질적인 비핵화로 전환한다면 국제사회와 협력하여 북한 경제와 북한 주민의 삶을 획기적으로 개선할 수 있는 담대한 계획을 준비하겠습니다.
President Yoon also signaled for a greater role for South Korea in the international community, adding it's now among the top 10 global economies.
Right, Jung-min, it is. And do tell us a bit about the guests at the inauguration.
Right, Sunny. So there were some 41,000 people invited to the event today, most of them ordinary citizens, some 24,000 ordinary people whose applications were chosen in a ballot were at the event. I had a chance to talk to some of them. Take a look.
직접 취임식에 직접 와서 새 대통령 멀리서나마 가까이서 볼 수 있다는 게 굉장히 기쁘고 영광스럽게 생각을 합니다.
제가 정치 쪽은 잘 알고 있는 게 없어서 경험 삼아 여기 오게 됐어요. 이런 취임식 자체가 처음이기 때문에 이게 어떻게 이루어지는지 또
Former presidents and their families were also present. There were some 300 foreign dignitaries, including U.S. Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff, Chinese Vice President Wang Qishan, and Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi. Upon arrival at the ceremony site, President Yoon and the First Lady got out of their car at the main gate of the National Assembly and walked all the way to the podium so that the president could meet and greet the people. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Jung-min, thank you for that coverage from the National Assembly. Now, after his inauguration, President Yoon made his way to his headquarters in Yongsan-gu district. I have Lee Kyung-eun standing by at the new presidential compound. Kyung-eun, let's start with the rest of his agenda for this Tuesday then.
Well, Sunny, President Yoon Suk-yeol actually went into his office right after the inauguration ceremony, and now, from now on, he's set to hold a series of meetings with delegates from other countries. And first up is the U.S. at 1:30 p.m., which will be followed by meetings with officials from Japan and the UAE. After that, he will briefly visit the National Assembly for a celebration event and then come back to resume meetings with delegates from China and Singapore. Yoon was here earlier at the building's underground bunker at midnight, where the National Crisis Management Center is located, to take his first military briefing as the new commander-in-chief. Previously, this place was used as a defense ministry compound, but now its main building has the presidential symbol, the phoenix and the national flower, marking the start of the Yongsan presidency for the first time in South Korean history. The relocation is all part of Yoon's efforts to take the position of president out among the public to better interact with people. And that's exactly what he did on his way to his office here, greeting neighborhood senior citizens and children.
Right. Kelvin, I hear that there is still some work, though, left with regard to setting up the presidential office.
That's right. The office Yoon will be using for now is on the 5th floor, but his actual office is on the 2nd floor, which is still in the middle of remodeling because the occupants on that floor began moving out later than others once recent South Korea U.S. military exercises ended in order to prevent any security leaks resulting from the move. Both offices will be used by Yoon from next month. In fact, security, costs, and logistics were among the issues that some questioned when Yoon's relocation plan was revealed, which at the time prompted concerns that relocation would not be possible by Inauguration Day. Beginning his term at the office of the Transition Committee was also talked about, but Yoon insisted he would not use the Blue House as he vowed to take the office of the president away from the secluded Blue House to become a more interactive leader while returning the Blue House fully to the public. That was actually #1 election pledge he made on the first day of his campaign, and this is the very first election campaign promise to be kept on the day he takes office. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Kyung-won, thank you for that. That was our Lee Kyung-won reporting from the new presidential office in Yongsan. Now, up next, we share with you more clips from President Yoon Suk-yeol's inauguration speech that placed much emphasis on freedom and respect for human rights. Arirang's Oh Soo-young has the highlights.
Defending freedom to overcome crises. That was the overarching message of President Yoon Suk-yeol's inauguration speech, setting the tone for the next 5 years of his administration and how it will tackle domestic and global challenges.
지금 전 세계는 팬데믹 위기, 교육 질서의 변화와 공급망의 재편, 기후 변화, 식량과 에너지 위기, 분쟁의 평화적 해결의 후퇴 등 어느 한 나라가 독자적으로 또는 몇몇 나라만 참여해서 해결하기 어려운 난제들에 직면해 있습니다. 다양한 위기가 복합적으로 인류 사회의 어두운 그림자를 드리우고 있는 것입니다. 또한 우리나라를 비롯한 많은 나라들이 국내적으로 초저성장과 대규모 실업, 양극화의 심화와 다양한 사회적 갈등으로 인해 공동체의 결속력이 흔들리고 와해되고 있습니다.
Yoon said freedom should be at the core of achieving social unity, where rationality and intellect should guide societal discourse and make compromises, something politics has failed to do, according to Yoon.
자유는 보편적 가치입니다. 우리 사회 모든 구성원이 자유 시민이 되어야 하는 것입니다. 어떤 개인의 자유가 침해되는 것이 방치된다면 나와 우리 공동체 구성원의 자유가 위협받게 되는 것입니다. 자유는 결코 승자 독식이 아닙니다. 자유 시민이 되기 위해서는 일정한 수준의 경제적 기초 그리고 공정한 교육과 문화의 접근 기회가 보장되어야 합니다. 이런 것 없이 자유 시민이라고 할 수 없습니다. 어떤 사람의 자유가 유린되거나 자유 시민이 되는데 필요한 조건을 충족하지 못한다면 모든 자유 시민은 연대해서 도와야 합니다.
Economic freedom and equal opportunity, Yoon said, should be universal, providing the basis for science and innovation to procure rapid and sustainable growth that's crucial for future freedom.
빠른 성장 과정에서 많은 국민들이 새로운 기회를 찾을 수 있고 사회 이동성을 제거함으로써 양극화와 갈등의 근원을 제거할 수 있습니다. 도약과 빠른 성장은 오로지 과학과 기술 그리고 혁신에 의해서만 이루어낼 수 있는 것입니다. 과학과 기술 그리고 혁신은 우리의 자유민주주의를 지키고 우리의 자유를 확대하며 우리의 존엄한 삶을 지속 가능하게 할 것입니다. 과학과 기술 그리고 혁신은 우리나라 혼자만의 노력으로는 달성하기 어렵습니다. 자유와 창의를 존중함으로써 과학기술의 진보와 혁신을 이뤄낸 많은 나라들과 협력하고 연대해야만 합니다.
In the face of regional security challenges, Yoon emphasized that freedom must reach every dark corner to promote human rights, peace and prosperity.
자유민주주의는 평화를 만들어내고 평화는 자유를 지켜줍니다. 그리고 평화는 자유와 인권의 가치를 존중하는 국제사회와의 연대에 의해 보장됩니다. 일시적으로 전쟁을 회피하는 취약한 평화가 아니라 자유와 번영을 꽃피우는 지속 가능한 평화를 추구해야 합니다. 지금 전 세계 어떤 곳도 자유와 평화에 대한 위협에서 자유롭지 못합니다. 지금 한반도와 동북아의 평화도 마찬가지입니다.
Particularly when it comes to North Korea, Yoon hinted there would be a bold plan to provide prosperity and freedom for the North Korean people.
저는 한반도뿐 아니라 아시아와 세계의 평화를 위협하는 북한의 핵 개발에 대해서도 그 평화적 해결을 위해 대화의 문을 열어놓겠습니다. 그리고 북한이 핵 개발을 중단하고 실질적인 비핵화로 전환한다면 국제사회와 협력하여 북한 경제와 북한 주민의 삶을 획기적으로 개선할 수 있는 담대한 계획을 준비하겠습니다.
The president on Tuesday voiced his humble but firm resolve to lead South Korea out of various crises and play a greater role on the world stage as a defender of liberal democracy.
지금 우리는 세계 10위권의 경제 대국 그룹에 들어가 있습니다. 그러므로 우리는 자유와 인권의 가치에 기반한 보편적 국제 규범을 적극 지지하고 수호하는데 글로벌 리더 국가로서의 자세를 가져야 합니다. 우리나라뿐 아니라 세계 시민 모두의 자유와 인권을 지키고 확대하는 데 더욱 주도적인 역할을 해야 합니다. 지금 국제사회도 대한민국에 더욱더 큰 역할을 기대하고 있음이 분명합니다. 지금 우리나라는 국내 문제와 국제 문제를 분리할 수 없습니다. 국제사회가 우리에게 기대하는 역할을 주도적으로 수행할 때 국내 문제도 올바른 해결 방향을 찾을 수 있는 것입니다.
Yoon pledged to do his utmost to elevate South Korea into a country that truly belongs to the people. a country based on the pillars of freedom, human rights, fairness and solidarity. 오수영, Arirang News.
Also on this Tuesday, as mentioned earlier, the former presidential office, better known as the Blue House, has been returned to the public as promised by President Yoon. And my colleague Kim Hyun-sung is there to gauge the public response to this event. Hyun-sung, what do you have for us?
Right, Sunny. So the Blue House gates have opened to the public for the first time in 74 years. The first round of tourists just swarmed in past the gates just a little before midday today. And there is a lot of excitement buzzing in the air. I heard some gasp and murmurs from people about how green and lush the greenery is in the Blue House grounds. So from today, a large number of people are allowed freely to browse around the Blue House grounds. And there were tours before today, but they were always in small numbers and tourists were always supervised. But today, 26,000 people were randomly selected to be here for the opening day. Some kids missed school to be here, and people of all ages came from near and far. A lot of people said that they were grateful, happy, and felt really lucky to be here. They will share their thoughts and interviews in our later newscast, so stay tuned.
Right, Hyun-sung. That being said, that in the meantime, what do visitors need to keep in mind while touring the grounds?
Right, so first of all, indoors are still off limits. There are still some confidential documents and office fixtures remaining in the building. So authorities want to have a little more time before they sort them out, before they let tourists inside. Before then, tourists can freely view the exteriors of some of the most famous Blue House halls, like the Yeongbing관, the official reception hall for dignified foreign guests, and Sangchungjae, the unofficial meeting area. In the garden, Nokjuon's greeneries are famously lush with over 120 types of trees. There's also a famous pine tree that's over 700 years old. But there are a lot of historical artifacts as well, like the seated stone Buddha. I also want to mention that the hiking trail behind the Blue House that leads up to the Pugaksan mountain has also opened up this morning for the first time in over 5 decades. I've been hiking up the trail since the wee hours, and I've got to say it's quite a view from up there. Anyone who's interested can now come and see for themselves without Blue House security stopping them. To get the full Blue House tour, people can still sign up through mobile apps like Kakao, Naver, or Toss. Tours are scheduled until the 22nd of this month and can accept up to 6,500 people at 2-hour intervals. So that amounts to 39,000 people in a day. Sunny, I'm going to be here until closing time and talking to more people, really taking in my first Blue House tour as well. So I'll be back at a later newscast with more. Back to you, Sunny.
Right, Hyun-sung, looking forward to that. That was our Kim Hyun-sung reporting from the Blue House. Meanwhile, prospects are high that the relocation of the South Korean presidential office to Yongsan will accelerate the development of this particular district. Our Lee Si-hoo explains.
As the president's office moves to Yongsan, the average price of housing in and around Yongsan is heading one way, up. In fact, property prices in Yongsan-gu district, along with the Seocho-gu and Gangnam-gu districts, have been steadily increasing for weeks now. Experts say Yongsan will develop even further with the arrival of the president's office.
Yongsan will serve as the backbone and the center, connecting 3 downtown areas as the Yongsan U.S. military base is returned and transformed into a park, and the president's office moves into the district.
The development of an international business district in Yongsan has thus far been a long drawn-out affair, but is now expected to speed up. And the construction of a residential complex within the international business district is also being considered to help boost the housing supply in Seoul. With the president's office and Yongsan Park in the center, there are plans to build the international business district to the west and redevelop the Hannam area to the east. To the north, an overall redevelopment of the area is planned. To the south, areas along the Hangang River will be renovated. The height plan for buildings in Yongsan has also been announced. Buildings up to a height of 620 meters will be allowed in the International Business District. For the areas near Yongsan Station, Samgakji Station, and Seoul Station, a limit of 150 meters, 130 meters, and 120 to 180 meters has been announced, respectively. In addition, Yongsan will serve as a transportation hub as a transfer complex is due to be constructed and the Gyeongbu railway line will be rebuilt underground.
I think it's meaningful as it facilitates the development of a structural urban space in Seoul.
However, some critics have concerns about the possible destruction of natural environments, and there are growing calls for development plans to be well thought out to ensure local habitats are not damaged in the rush to revamp the area. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
And on that note, we end part 1 of the Daily Report. We'll be back for part 2 in a few minutes, during which we'll be talking about the Yoon administration's national agenda with a panel of foreign journalists. Join us then.
Parasite.
Arirang, what matters?
모습을 기대합니다. 제외 동포청 설립을 조속히 요청드립니다. 제외 동포들이 자유로운 고국 방문으로 해외 자금을 국내에 자유롭게 투자할 수 있는 여건 조성을 부탁드립니다.
이제 코로나가 종식돼감에 따라서 조금 더 다른 나라들로 출장이나 여행들이 원활해졌으면 하는 바람들이 있고요. 많은 사람들의 염원처럼 통합의 정부 그리고 경제에 조금 더 기여할 수 있는 그런 정부가 되었으면 좋겠습니다.
또 한 명의 재외 국민으로서 바라는 것이 있다라고 하면은 한국에서 들려오는 소식들이 안타까운 사건, 사고에 관한 소식이 아니라 정말 여기 베트남 사람들에게 전해줄 수 있는, 자랑할 수 있는 기쁜 소식들이 많이 들려왔으면 좋겠습니다.
유학생으로서 아무래도 좀 장학제도에 부족한 점이 있었는데 이 점을 좀 외교적인 차원에서 해결해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
인도가 참여하고 있는 백신 협약국에 한국 정부도 참여하여 한국과 인도 간 비즈니스로 왕래하는 데 더욱 도움이 되었으면 더욱 좋겠습니다.
외국에 살고 있는 교민으로서 우리 대한민국이 자랑스러운 조국이 되었으면 좋겠습니다. 그래서 거주국에서 당당하게 조국을 내세울 수 있길 바랍니다.
한글 학교의 체계적인 운영을 위한 지원이 절실합니다. 조선족 자녀들이 우리말을 거의 모릅니다. 한국인 부부의 아이들도 우리말이 서툽니다. 왜냐하면 우리말로 교육하는 유치원이 없기 때문입니다. 영세하게 운영하는 한글 학교에 대한 체계적인 운영에 깊은 관심을 주어서 지원을 해주시기 바랍니다.
해외에 거주하면 누구나 한 번쯤 경험해봤을 외국인으로서 받는 차별, 불평등, 부당함으로 억울한 일들이 있습니다. 대한민국 국민이 억울한 일이 생기지 않도록 부디 세심하게 살펴주셔서 해외 거주 대한민국 국민으로서 안전하고 행복하게 자긍심을 갖고 열심히 생활할 수 있도록 해주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 20대 윤석열 대통령님의 취임을 진심으로 축하드립니다.
Welcome back. It's time for Viewpoint then. Yoon Suk-yeol has been inaugurated as president of South Korea earlier on this Tuesday. His administration has an ambitious list of 110 national tasks to be tackled over the next 5 years. And for more on this from the foreign media's perspective, I have Anthony Kuhn from NPR in the studio. Anthony, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Nice to join you.
I also have Stephen Barwick, contributing writer for Nikkei Asia, joining our talk. It's been a while, Stephen. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
Right, Anthony, we'll start with you then. Let's start off with your overall assessment of the new administration's roadmap.
Yes, well, that roadmap is contained in his public pronouncements and, as you mentioned, the 110 national tasks. And his comments at the inauguration seem pretty much in line with that. The list is, of course, topped with efforts to try to support small businesses as they recover from the pandemic. A lot of the items on the list are sort of vague or open to interpretation. There are also quite a few items which reverse the policies of his predecessor, Moon Jae-in. Chief among those, for example, being the decision to end the phase-out of nuclear energy and also to, as Yoon put it, normalize taxes on property and real estate, by which I believe he means to lower them. He's also planning, apparently, to trim the presidential bureaucracy a bit, from 3 offices down to 2, from 8 senior secretaries down to 5. And a lot has been said, of course, about his moving the seat of government from Jongno district down to my neighborhood, Yongsan. For the first time in centuries, it's leaving that area. And also it's been noted quite a bit that among his 110 national tasks, there were 2 key things missing that were in his campaign platform, which he's since dropped. One was that he pledged to increase the number of terminal high-altitude area defense, or THAAD, anti-missile batteries in South Korea, which, they made it clear they do not want more economic retaliation coming from Beijing. And also his plans to abolish the gender ministry. Apparently he's now going to just revamp or reorganize that. But regardless, it's clear that he has his work cut out for him.
Right, he does. Stephen, what are your thoughts on the feasibility of Yoon's national task, keeping in mind the hefty additional funding that he needs, 209 trillion won over the next 5 years?
We need to kind of caveat a lot of what Yoon is currently pledging with the fact that the Democratic Party still enjoys a pretty commanding majority in the legislature. So whatever Yoon wants to do, he has to appeal to the opposition, and he has to. Throughout his campaign, he was really kind of antagonistic, and he was, very kind of bold, and he styled himself as a kind of crusader. Now that he is president, now that he is tasked with leading the country, he's going to have to change tack a little bit somewhat, and he's going to have to play the role of persuader or convincer and try to bridge what has heretofore been a pretty sharp political divide in the country. So the amount of funding that he's pledging is, it's a number that kind of jumps out on the page, and it's a little bit ironic when you think that the party that Yoon represents just spent much of the past 5 years accusing the Moon administration of kind of profligate spending and of racking up an unsustainable level of debt. But now that Yoon's party are in power, they're doing what governments customarily do, and they're allocating a great amount of state funds to pursue different areas that they have deemed as being warranting state attention and state support. And the 2 administrations, I think Anthony did a nice job of laying out where they depart on some important things, but I think it's also worth noting that they actually kind of overlap in a lot of ways. The 2 administrations see support for business and support for green energy and ways of addressing the housing crisis and ways of addressing the economic damage of the pandemic. They do concur on the need to address a number of areas. The question now being just to what extent they can cooperate in the legislature to actually get things done.
Right, and only time will tell then.
That's right.
Anthony, on the diplomatic front, the Yoon administration has spoken about its plans to expand South Korea's presence in the international arena. And President Yoon also mentioned in his inauguration speech that he hopes to promote freedom and, of course, respect for human rights. Having said that, what do you believe are some tangible roles that the new administration here could perhaps play on the global stage?
Well, one of the key aspects of the foreign policies he's outlined is close alignment with the U.S. in its priorities. And I think Washington is going to be delighted and relieved to hear that. They particularly want South Korea to play a key role in a coalition of allies to deal with China. Some of those people may have felt that the Moon administration was insufficiently enthusiastic about pursuing that. And of course, on the campaign trail, Yoon appealed to a certain amount of anti-China sentiment. But since then, it's clear that he is going to manage that relationship very carefully. This came through in his speech, his phone talk with Chinese President Xi Jinping, remarks about cooperation with the Chinese envoy on peninsular affairs, Liu Xiaoming. And right now, it seems hard to imagine that, that South Korea can do some of the things that the U.S. wants outside the Korean peninsula, where they cooperate very well already on peninsular matters in North Korea. For example, hosting missiles that the U.S. might want to base here, getting involved in security operations in places such as the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait. Yoon has said he looks favorably on membership in the Quad, but right now that looks like it could be limited to working groups on things like climate and public health. And of course, those are all areas where South Korea can play an indispensable role as a middle power. But there are other areas, I think, in which its global aspirations can bump up against its regional priorities. For example, it's been reported that the U.S. Embassy requested that South Korea sell Cheongung surface-to-air missiles to help them defeat Russia, but South Korea said we can only do non-lethal aid. The concern was apparently that Russia could back North Korea, could help to arm it, and so there we had a conflict between global aspirations and regional realities.
Right, sadly. Stephen, staying on the diplomatic front then, President Yoon Suk-yeol seeks constructive ties with neighboring Japan. What are your prospects on these hopes?
This is always a fraught issue, and when we discuss the prospect of cooperation between South Korea and Japan, as outside observers, we often will point out that these are two Asian democracies that have a lot in common. They're both, thriving, advanced economies, and on the surface, it would seem as though there's great prospects for cooperation between the two, but there are these persistent historical issues that tend to come up between the two sides and tend to hinder that cooperation. So we do sometimes hear politicians on one side or the other discussing about the desirability of decoupling or separating the historical or political matters from economic and cultural exchange matters. I wonder if it would behoove Yoon to, at least at the early stages of his administration, to phrase ties with Japan mostly in economic terms, and if he could say that South Korea and Japan are two countries that have suffered from low economic growth for some time and have a nice bit of interchange when it comes to affinities for the other's cultures and a lot of tourism going back and forth. And if Yoon could describe Japan in terms of its potential as an economic partner, I think that would help get over some of the perhaps public opinion or political resistance that he might face if he were to make a kind of unencumbered pledge to improve ties with Tokyo. So baby steps perhaps would be a wise way for him to proceed.
Right, and staying with the economy, Anthony, the new administration hopes to promote an economy that is led by the people and backed by the government. Do you believe this stance will perhaps spur greater foreign investment into the country or perhaps serve as a momentum for greater economic recovery?
Well, foreign direct investment in South Korea has slumped a bit in past years, partially due to fallout from the U.S.-China trade spat, also because of a perception of regulatory and labor hurdles in this country. And there, Yoon's deregulation seems aimed to help. We'll see about that. Of course, as in other countries, inflation has jumped sharply. And in some countries, stimulus measures related to the pandemic have been blamed. That's the case in the U.S., where some people believe that Biden's measures to help businesses print money, spend money, have all jacked up inflation. But there are many other causes. The war, shortages, supply chain problems have all contributed to that. Household debt is very serious. It's more than GDP at the moment. President Yoon has said he wants to simplify loan regulations. It's not clear whether that could cause debts to balloon and get worse. And finally, as with Washington, there's going to be a lot of talk about economic security, securing supply chains and all that sort of thing. That's an unavoidable political risk due to great power conflict, and it may be of some help to South Korea's semiconductor manufacturers, but it could also make things more difficult for them. We saw that when the U.S. government requested information from the likes of Samsung and SK Hynix, and some of it was proprietary. It was trade secrets, and they just couldn't give it up. So it's not all easy for them.
Right. Stephen, also on the economy, the new administration is going to promote, this is something that Anthony mentioned earlier, promote green growth through re-adopting the nuclear energy campaign. Do you suppose this adoption, so to speak, will place the country perhaps on par with its international partners?
It depends on which international partners you're referring to, but it seems like there's a growing global consensus that it's desirable to move away from carbon-emitting sources of energy. And nuclear power, of course, has a mixed record. You can talk to different people who will provide differing assessments, but there are some experts who will argue that at this stage it makes sense to turn more to nuclear power because it is a non-carbon emitting form of energy. There are, of course, safety risks involved with the generation of nuclear power, but this perhaps will be one of the more consequential matters on which Yoon could depart from the practices of his predecessor. We'll have to wait and see. He will encounter some resistance from the political opposition and from the environmental activist groups, which are pretty well organized. But I think we can all agree that we would like to see less expensive and cleaner energy. So hopefully the two sides of the political aisle can cooperate toward that goal.
Right. Anthony, this is something my colleague Yoon Jung-min mentioned earlier. The recurring word during his inauguration speech was freedom today. But in the blueprint of the national tasks to be tackled, the recurring word appeared to be common sense. Having said that, what do you suppose is the intention behind this emphasis on common sense by the new administration?
Well, the implication seems to be was that common sense was somehow lacking from the previous administration. They also mentioned, upstanding or uprightness. So, we know pretty much what the Yoon administration did not like about the previous administration. He rejected their focus on eliminating the vestiges of authoritarian rule. He thought that the Moon administration was too chummy with China and North Korea, and he intends to fix these. But we should note that he has also tried to address some divisions within society. Notably, he visited Jeju Island on the anniversary of the suppression of the uprising there. It's something which continues to divide South Korean society more than 70 years after the event. Another thing that was highly divisive during the campaign period was that Yoon was criticized for denying the existence of structural gender discrimination. So we'll have to see how he deals with the many young women who are apprehensive about his administration, and also the many young men who were promised that the gender administration would be abolished, and who felt that feminism was to blame for their lack of employment and social mobility opportunities.
There is quite a bit of tasks for him to tackle, though.
Indeed.
All right, Anthony, thank you very much for your time today. And Stephen, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Russia's Vladimir Putin claims his invasion of Ukraine was inevitable as the West had reportedly been planning to attack his land. The remarks were made during his Victory Day address earlier on Monday. Our Jung reports.
Victimizing Russia, President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of preparing for an invasion of his land, provoking what he calls a special military operation in Ukraine. President Putin made the comments on Monday while presiding over the 77th Victory Day military parade in Moscow.
The NATO bloc began active military development of the territories adjacent to ours. This was an absolutely unacceptable threat systematically created for us, and it was right on our borders.
He claimed that NATO countries did not want to hear Russia's proposals for dialogue. He also defended the invasion of Ukraine, telling the troops that they're defending the motherland and its future. However, experts say the speech did not imply in any sense that Russia is backing down. The parade celebrates the Soviet Union's 1945 victory over the Nazis in World War II. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a speech commemorating World War II, denounced Russia by accusing it of implementing a bloody reconstruction of Nazism.
On the day of victory over Nazism, we are fighting for a new victory. The road to it is difficult, but we have no doubt that we will win.
He added that very soon there will be 2 victory days in Ukraine, and someone, meaning Putin, won't have any. The parade comes one day after Ukrainian authorities said that due to Russia's airstrike of a village school in eastern Ukraine, more than 60 people are feared dead. The governor of the Luhansk region said Russia bombed the school's basement on Saturday, where roughly 90 local residents were sheltering. 엄지영, Arirang News.
On the medical front, dry eye syndrome has become quite prevalent in modern society given the rampant exposure to electronic gadgets. Now, diagnosis of this syndrome, which is currently challenging, is looking to become easier. Our Ian Jin tells us how.
With increased use of smartphones, tablets, and other electronic devices, dry eye syndrome has become a common ailment. In fact, in 2020, 2.45 million people in South Korea were treated for dry eyes, or its scientific name, keratoconjunctivitis sicca, nearly double what was reported a decade ago. The natural layer of moisture in our eyes, the tear film, is made of 3 layers: a lipid layer, an aqueous layer, and a mucus layer. And depending on which of these layers is damaged, the cause of dry eye syndrome varies. In order to detect the exact layer that has the problem, the conjunctival goblet cells in the mucus layer need to be checked. But until now, there hasn't been a way to do that. South Korean researchers have successfully developed a high-resolution imaging device that does the job. It can take 10 images per second and even clarify cells that may have been out of focus. The biggest advantage is that test results are available in just 10 seconds. And the dye used for the imaging has an antibiotic space, meaning it doesn't cause any damage to a person's eye.
We have to take the image of the conjunctiva while it's tilted, which is why the microscope we've developed has a very high depth of focus, 30 times a normal microscope, which has a depth of focus of 10 to 30 micrometers, so that it can produce a stable image of the human eye.
The research team tested the imaging device on rabbits as their eyes are similar in size to human eyes. Actual tissue cell samples of goblet cells in the rabbit eyes were compared under a microscope with images captured with the imaging device. The 2 were identical. The research team plans to receive approval for the device to be used in clinical trials by 2024 before commercializing it to help treat dry eye syndrome in the future. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, researchers at the Korean Advanced Institute of Science and Technology have devised a way for computers to save data even in the absence of power. Our Chong-Won-jo explains.
In most cases, the computer will lose all data when it is turned off and will take time to reboot when the power is turned on again. This is because most computers use volatile memory, or memory which can only store information temporarily.
The memory can only store information when electricity is provided. All information disappears when the power is turned off, so all actions need to be performed again once the device restarts.
South Korean researchers have developed the world's first computer that has all volatile memory removed. Even after turning the computer off and on again, work that was there previously is still visible. Non-volatile memory that can permanently store all information makes this possible. Conventional non-volatile memory had only played auxiliary roles for computers as the slow operation speeds made it impractical to use. A research team at South Korean University KAIST modified the structure of non-volatile memory so that it can simultaneously handle multiple tasks and perform quickly. They also simplified the complex structure and deleted unnecessary paths to increase storage capacity. The new computer has 8 times the storage capacity of an ordinary computer and is 4 times faster. Researchers believe that applying this technology to mobile phones could significantly increase battery life.
If a mobile phone can start functioning without having the operating system mark reappearing when you turn it off and on, we could potentially use the battery for up to 3 months.
Researchers also believe that applying this technology to data centers that need a 24-hour supply of power to store big data could dramatically reduce maintenance costs and increase server stability. 정은주, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the Philippines, a winner appears to be emerging in the country's presidential election. According to unofficial and ongoing tallies by the nation's election commission, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. looks set to take the presidency. Tallies show the candidate is on the cusp of securing the 27.5 million votes needed to win a majority. As of the most recent count, Marcos Jr. had 26.3 million votes, more than double the 12.5 million votes so far secured by Leni Robredo, the sitting vice president. As of now, around 82% of eligible ballots have been counted. Preliminary results signal a return to power for the Marcos family some 36 years after its ousting, following a people power revolution against former president and dictator Ferdinand Marcos. Ruling from 1965 to 1986, the nation's previous leader imposed martial law for a 9-year period. It was a time that saw the arrest, torture and killing of thousands of his opponents. In Sri Lanka, the nation's Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned on Monday to make way for a unity government to handle the country's worst economic crisis in history. The move also came mere hours after clashes broke out in the capital Colombo, where ruling party supporters stormed an anti-government protest camp. This despite a nationwide curfew and state of emergency that was imposed earlier by the Prime Minister's younger brother, Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Reports indicate that 5 people have died, including a ruling party parliamentarian, while over 190 have been injured. Russia's ambassador to Poland was soaked in red paint on Monday by protesters voicing their opposition to Moscow's war on Ukraine. The incident occurred as Sergei Andreev went to lay flowers at the Soviet military cemetery in Warsaw to mark the 77th anniversary of the Soviets' victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. The day honors the 27 million Soviets who died during the war. However, Russia's invasion of Ukraine tainted the event, with Poland opposing any significant commemoration in a show of support for Ukraine. Footage uploaded to Twitter showed the protesters surrounding the Russian delegation chanting fascists before Andreev was doused in paint. He was ushered away unharmed. Airline passenger traffic is recovering faster than anticipated from the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking to Reuters Monday, the Director General of the International Air Transport Association, Willie Walsh, said the steady easing of virus restrictions around the world has released pent-up demand. He added the near-term prospects look positive despite challenges caused by high oil prices, inflation and workforce shortages. Long-term, the head of the association said he believes pre-pandemic levels of traffic could return as early as 2023, spurred on by an expected high turnout for next year's summer season. A British jetsuit company is giving emergency services the ability to improve search and rescue missions in remote locations. The suit's inventor and developer Richard Browning conducted a test flight in northern England and completed a 750-meter climb over 2 kilometers in just 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Browning said that the cost of the jetpack is only a fraction of what is spent on a helicopter and crew, with paramedics now receiving lessons on how to operate the suit. Consisting of 2 turbines, the 3D-printed suit is able to reach speeds of 128 kilometers per hour and is capable of climbing to an altitude of 3,650 meters. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Tuesday afternoon. Today is the inauguration day of Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol, and unlike yesterday, it's a bit cloudier. Unfortunately, it's going to get murkier later today with a slight chance of rain on Jeju overnight. Temperature-wise, the sun is shining through the clouds, raising the temperatures like early summer in most inland regions, topping off at 24 or 25 degrees. But areas in the east are relatively cooler. Busan, 20 degrees. Please dress in layers to keep yourself warm in the evening. The good thing is that we don't have to be concerned about air quality, but UV index is still high in many regions. Also, the ozone concentration level is pretty high in Jeollanam-do province, so you'd better not stay outside for a long time if you live there. Plus, strong gusts are in the forecast on the south coast and Jeju. Please be aware of flying objects or debris. It's going to be partly cloudy with wide gaps in readings for the time being. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
And that is all the time we have for now. Do stay tuned to Arirang News for more on the day's headlines, including the launch of the Yoon administration.